In the heart of Umwahia village, there lived a woman named Oluchi, a healer like no other. Her hands were gentle, her heart full of kindness, and her voice, when she sang healing songs, sounded like the wind brushing through the trees. She didn't wear gold or sit with chiefs, but when Oluchi walked by, even the sick sat up to smile. She knew the secrets of leaves, the language of roots, and the whispers of ancestors. People came from nearby villages just to sit under her hut's shade, to feel the coolness of her touch and the warmth of her words. And always beside her was her little daughter, Ozioma. Ozioma was just 10, bright-eyed, full of questions, and always watching. She would sit by the mat, legs folded, listening to her mother hum as she crushed bitter cola or stirred clay pots filled with strange-smelling herbs. "Mama," she once asked, "how do the leaves know what's wrong with the body?" Oluchi smiled, brushing Ozioma's cheek with stained fingers. "Because the land listens, my child. And I listen to the land." Together, they made healing oil for fevers. They sang songs to help wounds close faster. And they offered thanks to the ancestors who walked unseen, guarding them with wisdom older than time. But then, everything changed. It started small. One goat fell, then two. Then children began to cough, and men grew weak. Fear settled over the village like a thick, black cloud. People whispered in the markets, "The gods are angry. Who brought this curse?" The village square became a place of meetings. Drums were beaten, fires lit, and prayers offered. And then came the voice of Chief Priest Abalolu. He was once a friend to Oluchi, but envy had rotted his heart like bad yam. He didn't like how people trusted her more than they feared him. So one night, as the wind howled through the trees, Abalolu stood before the people in his red and white robes and said, "This sickness is not natural. It is the work of a witch. A woman who pretends to heal but brings death beneath her smile." And just like that, they turned on her. Oluchi stood silent as they grabbed her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Only Ozioma cried, louder than the drums, louder than the wind. "Mama! No! Leave her alone!" She kicked, she fought, but strong hands pulled her away. And as the fire was lit under the village tree, Ozioma's world burned with it. Her mother stood proud, eyes on the sky, even as flames licked her feet. Her last words echoed through the smoke. "Truth does not die in fire, it rises with it." And then silence. The healer was gone, and all Ozioma had left were ashes and the echo of her mother's voice in the wind. After the fire, Ozioma had no home. The people of Umwahia turned their faces away. Her mother was now called the Cursed One, and that curse, they believed, lived on in her daughter. So they banished her. She wandered for days, hungry, lost, afraid. The forest became her roof, the roots her pillows, the stars her only comfort. But even in the darkness, the ancestors were watching. One evening, as the sky turned orange, a woman appeared on the road. Wrinkled but strong, with a voice like wind through dry leaves. Her name was Mama Neka, a traveling herbalist with eyes that seemed to see everything, even pain you didn't speak. She looked at the frightened girl and asked softly, "Who burned your voice, child?" Ozioma couldn't answer. She just cried. Mama Neka didn't ask again. She simply reached out, wrapped her in a cloth, and took her along. In the hills of Obodo Achi, far from Umwahia, Ozioma found shelter, not just from the rain, but from her memories. Mama Neka didn't believe in curses. She believed in herbs, in balance, in listening. Under her care, Ozioma learned to heal again, how to mix bark for fever, how to speak to the land with your feet, how to know which plants sing and which ones sting. But there were things she didn't learn to do. She didn't learn to speak of her past. She buried her mother's name deep inside, where no one could hurt it. Years passed. Ozioma grew. By 17, she could treat a broken leg, soothe a child's fever, or find medicine in places others saw only weeds. But peace is a river that doesn't always stay still. One market morning, a woman staggered in, coughing blood. Her child followed, eyes wide with fear. Soon others fell sick, just like in Umuahia. Goats died. Men trembled with fever. Panic spread. The air grew heavy again. Ozioma watched it unfold with a pounding heart. She crushed herbs with shaking hands. She watched the villagers gather around fires. She heard the whispers. A curse. No, not again. This wasn't a curse. This wasn't witchcraft. She had seen this before, and something deep within her cracked open, the part she had locked away in silence. She saw again the fire in Umuahia. She heard her mother's voice. Truth does not die in fire, it rises with it. And in that moment, something rose in Ozioma. Not just fear, fire. Not the fire that destroys, but the fire that reveals. The fire of truth. At 18, Ozioma was no longer the trembling child who had once watched her mother burn. Now, she was stronger, wiser, and she had a new name, Zemira. It wasn't just a disguise. It was a shield. In the tongue of old spirits, it meant one who returns with purpose. She had traveled for days, past rivers and hills, until she stood once more at the edge of her old home, Umuahia. But Umuahia was no longer the same. The laughter was gone. The drums were quiet. Houses leaned like tired elders, and fear floated in the air like smoke. She passed women with hollow eyes. Children coughed behind their mothers' wrappers. Even the trees seemed sad. And still, the voice of Chief Priest Abalolu echoed in the village square. Dressed in thick red robes and white chalk, his words struck fear into the hearts of the weak. "The spirits are watching," he shouted. "Only obedience will protect us from the darkness. Do not welcome strangers. Do not question the ancestors." Zemira watched from the shadows. The same man who had lied, who had turned the village against Oluchi, now ruled with even more fear. He hadn't changed, only grown hungrier for control. But Zemira did not come to fight with words. She came with healing. Quietly, she began to help. First, the coughing child near the river. Then a pregnant woman who couldn't walk. She left small clay pots of medicine outside huts, never asking for thanks. The people didn't know her name, but they began to whisper, "The silent healer." She touches the sick, and they rise. Her hands remind me of someone. Every time Zemira healed someone, she tied a red thread around her waist, right where Oluchi's old waist beads now sat, hidden under her wrapper. The beads were warm against her skin, like her mother's hand guiding her. She didn't need to shout who she was. Her work would speak. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a young boy ran through the square shouting, "The healer cured my sister. She's eating again." And across the crowd, Abalola's eyes narrowed. He felt her presence. He felt the same energy he once burned at the stake. But now it had returned. Not as fire, as light. It was once full of laughter. Herbs hung from the ceiling. Steam rose from clay pots. Healing lived here. Now, Oluchi's hut was only ashes and crumbling mud walls. But Zemira knelt beside it, letting her fingers brush the soil. "Mama, I'm here," she whispered. Something pulled her toward a spot near the back, where the ground was a little firmer. She began to dig. With bare hands, she pushed through dirt, roots, and broken memories, until her fingers struck something wrapped in faded red cloth. She lifted it gently. Inside was Oluchi's journal. The pages smelled like smoke and herbs. Each one was covered in her mother's flowing handwriting, recipes for healing, chants, drawings of plants. But near the middle, tucked into the spine, was a smaller note, written by a trembling hand. It was a confession from an old elder named Nduka, who had died not long after Oluchi. His words were shaky but clear. It was not witchcraft that sickened us. Abalolu told me to pour something into the village's stream, said it would test the people's loyalty. I was weak. I obeyed. Then the children fell sick. The goats died, and we blamed Oluchi because it was easy. Zemira's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had died for truth, but truth had not died with her. With the journal pressed to her chest, Zemira walked to the edge of the village, to the ancient sacred tree of truth, where ancestors were once honored and justice was asked from the spirits. Most feared the place now, but she stepped forward. At the roots of the great tree, she poured earth from Oluchi's hut. Then she placed a small fire bowl in the center, adding herbs from her pouch, ones her mother used to cleanse lies. She spoke, low and steady. "Spirits of our land, I call not for revenge, but for truth. Let what was buried rise." The fire sparked, then roared. The earth beneath her hummed. The branches of the sacred tree swayed, though there was no wind, and from the fire, smoke curled upward, shaping into a vision. The villagers' past returned before her eyes. Abalolu whispering to Elder Nduka, the poison poured into the water. Oluchi pleading her innocence, and the fire that consumed her. Tears streamed down Zemira's face. The ancestors had answered. The soil no longer held secrets. It held evidence. And now it was time for the truth to rise with the morning. The morning sun rose over Umwahia, golden and warm. Drums echoed through the valley. Today was the festival of renewal, a day to cleanse the old and welcome the new. Villagers gathered in the square, dressed in bright wrappers, faces painted with white clay. Abalolu stood tall in his red robes, arms lifted as he chanted praises to the spirits. But something shifted in the crowd. From the back, a young woman stepped forward, calm, bold, and unshaken. Her wrapper was simple, her voice soft but clear. "Zemira, or rather, Ozioma, I am the daughter of Oluchi," she said, "the healer you burned." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some stepped back. Others leaned forward, unsure whether to listen or run. But Ozioma didn't flinch. She held up the red-wrapped journal and began to read. Her mother's voice came alive in her own. "To heal is not to harm. The land is sick when truth is buried, and the fire meant to destroy can also purify." She turned the page, reading Elder Nduka's confession aloud. Each word cracked the lies Abalolu had built like thunder-cracking stone. The sickness was poison in the water. It was no curse. It was no spirit. It was fear and control. Abalola's voice burst through the silence. "Lies!" he roared. "She is a witch, like her mother." He raised his staff, muttering curses, calling on spirits to strike her down. But Ozioma stepped forward, holding a small clay bowl, the same one from the sacred tree. She lit a flame. The fire glowed red and gold, rising like a memory, like justice. And Abalolu's words died on his tongue. His staff cracked in his hand. The people stared, wide-eyed, trembling, not in fear of Ozioma, but in awe. The same fire that had once burned Oluchi now burned with her truth. Ozioma's voice rang out. "The fire you used to silence her now burns with her truth." There was no shouting, just silence, then sobbing. One by one, villagers dropped to their knees. The women wept. The elders looked away in shame. And slowly, like a tide turning, they rose, not with pitchforks, not with weapons, but with truth. They surrounded Abalolu, their former protector now exposed as their poison. And together they cast him out. No blood, no fire, just the truth and the courage to face it. The sun was setting gently over Umuahia, painting the skies in soft gold and deep orange. But for the first time in many years, the village did not fear the darkness. They gathered in a wide circle, hands joined. At the center stood Ozioma. One of the elders, his eyes wet with tears, stepped forward, holding something small in his hand. Oluchi's sacred beads, worn, warm, and still carrying the scent of healing herbs. "We failed your mother," he whispered, "but we will not fail you." He placed the beads gently around Ozioma's waist. A hush fell over the crowd. Ozioma, once the girl who ran from fire, now stood tall in it. With her mother's beads and her own strength, she was no longer just a healer. She was a light. The people lifted her hands and led her to a place long abandoned, the old healing hut beside the poisoned well. Together, they rebuilt it. The walls rose again, one layer of clay after another. The well was dug clean, its stones scrubbed with salt and sacred herbs. At the shrine, they lit a new fire, not to destroy, but to bless. Children danced in circles, their laughter echoing through the trees. They sang a new song, simple and sweet. She who burned now lights our path. Oluchi's love returns at last. And in their song, the village was made whole again. As the night deepened, Ozioma stood beneath the stars, watching the flames flicker in the new healing sanctuary. The same fire that once took her mother now warmed the hearts of her people. And in a soft voice, like a promise to the wind, the final words echoed. The girl who watched her mother burn became the flame that saved us all. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. Turn on your notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.